First of all, can I thank Right to Work for the invitation for BARAC to speak. Right to Work and BARAC have been working together in solidarity since our formation and your formation, I think, from the very earliest days. So it's delightful to be able to be here again today. I'm not going to repeat what you probably already heard repeated several times again this morning. I'm going to focus specifically on the way this economic recession has impacted upon black communities. And what I can tell you is that I travel up and down the country. We've got barracks in Bristol, in Liverpool, in Moss Side, in Manchester, as well as London and elsewhere. And what I'm seeing is a scorched earth policy where the black community is concerned. Because all of the resources that we worked for and campaigned for and gained for over the last 30 odd years have been snuffed out, whether that's youth provision, alternative youth provision for the youngsters, whether it's elderly provision in relation to our Afro-Caribbean elders. You know, I remember the campaign in the early 80s just to demand that African Caribbean elders could have ackee and saltfish for their meals on wheels instead of bangers and mash. Nothing wrong with bangers and mash occasionally, but you know, you're from the Caribbean, you're going to want that kind of food just as like anybody else would. And it was a huge hoo-ha. Couldn't possibly be done. We don't have the chef specialisms. We can't do this. We can't do that. And we finally got it through. And with Eric Pickles and this coalition government, which, funny enough, you know, gives the impression as being a government that is sort of liberal centre, but is in fact one of the most extreme right-wing governments I've ever seen in my life. Because behind the rhetoric lies a brutality in terms of their policy implementation that is just staggering. And the NHS tells you that, the treatment of students tells you that. You know, this is an extraordinary extreme government. And they've wiped out all the specialist provision. So whereas before you could get money for working with Afro-Caribbean girls or Bangladeshi girls or young Afro-Caribbean men and so on, Pickles has said multiculturalism, state-sponsored multiculturalism is dead. We all know what Cameron said in Munich to give the green light to the racist EDL in Luton. And Pickles, his attack dog, has said, under the Department of Community and Local Government, we're not funding anything at all that is separate. So if Afro-Caribbeans want ackee and saltfish and they're not prepared, right, to go to the Derby and Joan Club, then they're not going to get it. And that's not just in social care, that's in health, that's in youth provision. Right across the board, we're seeing the closure of black specific voluntary sector projects that came out of the struggle of black communities just to try and force mainstream to become an equal opportunity service provider. And when they failed, we then demanded that we had a separate provision. All that is gone. And so what you've got is communities that are deeply alienated. You've got youth unemployment. I don't know if you saw the figures in The Guardian come out just last week, where black youth unemployment over the last 3 years increased by 70%. Now we're looking at levels in places like Peckham and Toxteth and Bradford and others. We're looking at areas that have got criminally high levels of youth unemployment prior to the recession. We were already enormously unemployed at that point. Since the recession has come in 2008, we've seen those figures skyrocket. And at the same time, because we all know that racism and recession go hand in hand, as the ruling class seek to identify and point the finger at the scapegoats they think are responsible, we know that there has unleashed a torrent of anti-Muslim, anti-black, anti-immigrant and refugee and asylum seeker abuse. Never seen the like of it. So not only are all those who took place in terms of the riots criminal, as opposed to people who erupted in the face of a massive injustice of the shooting of Mark Duggan in Tottenham. They're criminal. All asylum seekers and refugees are bogus and benefit tourists. And all Muslims are terrorists. We know the rhetoric, we've heard it. And this is exactly what's happening during this recession. This recession is no different to the ones in the mid to late 70s, where we saw the rise of the National Front at that time. In the mid-80s, with Thatcher, the civil disturbances, the rise of the British National Party, the rise of state-sponsored racism through massive blanket levels of stop and search. Stop and search on black communities since in London, since 2007, have increased by 350%. 350%. So that means 140,000 black people stopped on the search streets of London last year. 140,000. Right? 14,000 got charged. 50% of the 14,000 got charged, right, didn't go to court. I.e. they got arrested, 14,000 got arrested, and then only 7,000 of them got charged. Out of the 7,000 who got charged, 50% of them got charged for Section 5 public order offence. You know that's failing the attitude test, for failing to pay due deference to a white man in a blue uniform. It'll get you locked up every single time. So that means that 3.5 out of 140,000 people, 3,500 end up with a charge of one sort or another. And we've seen those increases unleashed, particularly by Boris Johnson, this mayor, who said, yes, in response to the violence that is implicit in black communities and so on, we now give the police free rein to stop and search as many young black people as they like. And what we've seen since the riots and the disturbances is that the black youth prison population has increased by 100% since August last year. 100%. So I'm now seeing black youth who if you can find riot cases going on, it's really instructive to go and sit in the court for a day, as I did at Elephant and Castle, and watch Crown Prosecution Service offer no evidence for young black men who are coming into the dock. No evidence, we've got no evidence, we're still compiling the case, we're not quite sure, he was in the general facility, blah blah blah. Has he got any previous form? No, he's got no previous form. We're going to put him on remand. You get remand when the CPS offers no evidence and you are sent to remand. You see, I remember this in 81 and 86 because I was in the part of that era too. In 81, after disturbances and the moral panic about mugging, the police were unleashed a sort of massive clean-up operation. This was happening pre-Olympics, you know that, don't you? Get the streets cleaned up before the Olympics. There's a massive focus on arresting black youth in 81. We all went to prison, either for sus or for street robbery charges, and we got disproportionate sentences. You remember at the time, Stuart Hall wrote a big, fantastic book about it, and it was all on our sociology courses the other day. 2 minutes, okay. So, all those young kids went to jail and got disproportionate sentences. But what happened? That single act politicised the black community like no other act before. Because little Johnny, who's about to take his A-levels, who did one moment of madness, and his life completely fucking ruined because of the vendetta and the vengeance and the racism of the state, who decided that they were going to target black youth. And that's exactly what's happening today. So kids who have got no real record of criminal activity have now find themselves 6 months, 12 months in jail, and their families who are, otherwise supportive of their kids are thinking, what the hell's happening here? And how is it our kids have ended up in this position? So in terms of the cuts, ideologically driven, that they will use racism as a means of scapegoating our communities, that black youth particularly at the moment are under the cosh in terms of levels of unemployment and levels of criminalisation through the constant culture of institutionalised racism that produces racial profiling, stop and search. And then we've got massive redundancies amongst black women in particular, who are in the public service. 80% of the Afro-Caribbean community of the United Kingdom works in public service. That's because of the racism of the private sector and the equality policies of the public sector. That's why that is. And we all know that out of that profile, black women have the highest employment rate. Black men are, long-term unemployed for a great deal of time. The one thing that has been keeping black families above the waterline, just above the waterline, is the fact that one of our parents is at least working and able to provide some resources. If black women now are to join the ranks of black men at the same level of unemployment as we are, that is a total fucking disaster for a black community that is already immersed in acute and extreme poverty. And so what you've got to imagine is, yes, we are all in this together. I get some people on the left saying, well, I'm finishing up now. well, you know, why are you distinguishing black communities as opposed to white communities? Isn't that a divergence from the struggle? And I just say to them, look, let's be clear here, that yes, we're all in this together, but the lens of racism magnifies the impact on black communities, and that lens is focused on us. We're already living in the most deprived communities. We're already suffering discrimination at all sorts of levels. And therefore the impact is over and above what it would be normally. So disproportionate impact. And that's why we've got this struggle, the anti-cut struggle has got to be profoundly anti-racist. Because we know behind Cameron and the EDL, and black, there's all sorts of people who say, you know, we would like to make Kay while the sun shines. I don't know how fucking the comedian who I used to have a lot of respect for, Alan What's-His-Tits, he was interviewing that the arch-fascist Nick Griffin. Did you see that on the telly the other day? Yeah, I was hoping he was going to smack him in the mouth, actually, Alan, because I thought that would be it. You'd go for a nice interview and say, interview done. That would be it. If you ever see him sharing a platform with Nick Griffin, you know that's going to come before the end of the interview, all right? So, again, you know, he's up there, blah, blah, blah. Nick Griffin spouting his poison up there, and so on and so forth. So we understand and we know where the attack is going to come from in order to divide us. It's going to point to the blacks, it's going to point to the disabled people, it's going to point to the Muslims, it's going to point to lesbian and gay communities in relation to same-sex civil marriages. And don't buy the sort of fake posturing of Cameron, you know, yeah, I'm all for it, and so on and so forth, in terms of gay equality in relation to marriages and so on and so forth. Because his politics will increase homophobia, increase racism, increase discrimination against disabled people, the elderly and the young. That's much more than my 2 minutes, Jay. You've been very careful. And I'm sorry I'm a bit rambling, but I only got the call yesterday to say, come and do the speak. So I hope it's been of some use. Thank you.